Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so picking up with the next part, did you guys really think I was going to leave you on a cliffhanger? Did you really think I was going to leave you hanging today? Not at all, right? We got to keep this going, man. We got to keep this going. The power of divine spawn, and holy cow. It is amazing, right? So what this does is this picks up really with kind of like the beginning of the end of things, essentially like Armageddon in full swing. And now initially there are some strange things going on here that will be explained later on as we kind of go through. But with Cyan essentially having helped Spawn, and during the time when she was helping him face off against the disciple, there was this kind of protective sphere that was created around Cyan to make sure that nothing could harm her, right? That she'd be able to focus explicitly on what it was that she was doing and not have to worry about anything else. Now outside of the sphere is Wanda and Terry. But as we end up seeing here, there's basically this kind of, monster looking thing that basically starts trying to hammer against the sphere and destroy it, with Wanda and Terry and Cyan inside. Now, of course, it is holding and it is keeping them protected, but this monster being there is really kind of the indication of, okay, this is where everything is really sort of coming to an end, right? The rise of the four horsemen and all that kind of stuff. And so picking up with the aftermath of the disciple having killed Spawn, we get the reason why this took place. And the reason for that is because with regards to how this functions, the disciple, I guess the element, the personality of Judas Iscariot, as we know from Judeo-Christianity, basically ratted on Jesus, right? Turned Jesus in. In the Spawn mythos, it was done because the only way for Jesus's life to have any meaning was if he was crucified. And the only way for him to be crucified was for Judas Iscariot to basically turn him in. So it was the role that Judas played. Spawn is much the same way. Spawn has to die and then be reborn again in order to basically experience all this power, right? To kind of be reborn as this new version of himself. And that was kind of the on-running theme, right? Technically, the mother of creation killed God and Satan, and then they were reborn in human form, right? So it's more or less the same process when it comes to Spawn. The issue with this is what the mother of creation does is she basically says that in the beginning of humanity, when Adam and Eve were created and they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it scared God, right? Because God was now scared of the fact of what they could achieve, that they could in turn, by having knowledge of good and evil, also know of the tree of life. And in consuming or eating from the tree of life, they would become immortal and then become gods, much like God and Satan had. That was the fear. That's why they were cast out of the Garden of Eden, and that's why they were sent out into the world, and then things just kind of progressed from there. And so what the mother of creation does is basically take fruit from the tree of life and then feed it to Al Simmons. And when that happens, Al Simmons is completely resurrected. Now, with that being the case, he's now divine Spawn, or at least he has all this like an insane amount of power to him. Now, it's kind of interesting because Spawn doesn't really know all the power that he has, but he will figure it out, and we will see what it is that he can do with all this power that he's been granted. But one of the ways in which you differentiate between divine Spawn and regular Spawn are the angel wings. That's usually like, if you ever do a Google search for divine Spawn, that's what you will see, Spawn with angel's wings. That's really kind of the big differentiation here. Now, the other part of this is the 6,000 souls that were bonded to Spawn have now basically been allowed to leave his body. The knowledge and experience that he gained from those souls are still part of Spawn himself, but the souls themselves are now out leaving and doing their own thing, including Christopher. But the idea here is that now it's Spawn's job to go out into the world and essentially save it, right? That's the entire purpose of Spawn at this moment. And so one of the first things he does is he stumbles across this old man, and we get this first little indication of Spawn's power, right? Insofar as this man comes running at him with a stick, and Spawn basically makes the stick disappear and then says, "Tell me what's going on here." And this is when we get an indication of what had happened, right? For the world out there, they didn't really know what was going on, right? I mean, aside from what was going on inside of the house of Wanda and Terry, nobody knew what was taking place. For them, it was business as usual. People were going to work, people were getting, doing their thing, the news was being reported, all that kind of stuff. And then out of nowhere, the four horsemen start to rise. The first one comes pestilence, right? And all those who were in his shadow basically start experiencing all these forms of plagues, right? This idea that like their skin starts melting off and different things along those lines. These swarm of insects just come flying out of nowhere with the horsemen of death, right? That basically death starts bringing death to all these various humans around it. Around the same time that happens, famine rises, and famine basically drives people to this point of extreme hunger, but never being able to be satiated, right? It's kind of a hunger in their soul that they can never fully totally satisfy. And then the final horseman to show up is the Horseman of War. And this kind of scream, or this kind of shout that it makes, drives people back down into their most primal base forms, twists and screws them up. And that's the kind of being that we saw trying to tear up and trying to destroy the force field that was basically protecting Cyan, Wanda, and Terry. And so following that, the four horsemen across the apocalypse, or the four horsemen of the apocalypse, start wreaking havoc everywhere, right? The forces of hell are more or less kind of solidified in these sort of, twisted, screwed up versions of humanity. But at this point, what you end up getting is kind of like these armies of heaven and hell who are basically marching to this one particular island. And the reason why is because this is where the final battle is going to take place. And it's kind of interesting because the way it's depicted here is they're within eyesight of each other. All the forces of heaven have to do is look to the right, and like all the forces of hell are right over there. All the forces of hell have to do is look to the left, and all the forces of heaven are right there. But they're basically being drawn to this one island, to this one location, to basically fight against each other. Now, once they get there, that's when the battle begins to take place. And Spawn basically travels to that direct location and comes into contact with Zera. Now remember, Zera is kind of like this super powerful agent of heaven, right? So she's like the 007 of heaven, more or less, I guess. I don't really know how to quantify that, but she's super powerful, right? I mean, remember, she was the one who was able to like decimate the forces of hell when they had entered heaven, right? The Forgotten, more or less. She decimated all of them single-handedly. And so with Spawn approaching her, it's one of these things where it's kind of a vendetta against the two. She initially looks at him and says like, you're a hellspawn. My job is to destroy you because you threaten the rule of God. And it's kind of crazy because initially her rage, if you guys recall, manifests in the form of a giant beast. Spawn takes this beast out like that. It happens in seconds, right? It's ridiculous how fast it gets destroyed. It's kind of nuts here. With that happening, he in turn starts to go after Zera. And Zera puts up a good fight, but it's like, nope, like she gets taken out quick, fast, and in a hurry. For those of you guys who are looking to quantify this, imagine a singular being powerful enough to take out the Living Tribunal in Marvel Comics in the blink of an eye. Imagine that. That's basically what this is, right? Like the Beyonders, more or less. God out there created Zera as like his number one person, right? The top person in his arsenal, the one he sends forward to take everything out, the Living Tribunal-esque kind of a character. Spawn comes along, donezo. That's it, right? Like she goes to cut Spawn in half, and then Spawn just basically heals himself and then just starts smashing Zera, right? Just absolutely just like crushing this girl, and then just sort of just leaves her there, right? And then following that, punches a hole in her and then decapitates her, right? Basically just like rips her head off, and that's the end of her. Following that, he starts going forward. As he's making his way to where God and Satan are at, you have basically the last two of these massive demon monsters fighting each other. And one of them is essentially taken out and then starts, kind of lets out this scream of pain. Spawn follows the shout, only to realize that it's basically Granny Blake, right? Granny Blake was the last soldier fighting. And when the armor begins to kind of go away, right? Like Spawn destroys this demon pretty fast, but when the armor starts to kind of melt away and it reveals Granny Blake, that she basically says, nothing was what we thought it was. You were right. God and Satan are dicks, right? Like they're like really crappy people. They're not what we thought they were. We thought like God was caring and loving and loved us like a father and that kind of a thing. No, like we're pawns in this great big huge game. And you tried to tell me that was true and I didn't believe. But the response of Spawn, and this is really kind of cool here, the response of Spawn is, I understand that, but the heaven that you've been shown by this God is not the true heaven. There's got to be a real heaven out there, a real afterlife for all these people out there, right? This cannot simply be it. If there are other gods on other planets all across the universe, then like, where do the gods go when they die, right? Like what happens when all this takes place? There has to be some definitive afterlife out there, and that's where you're going. You're going to go to that place and you're going to experience everlasting peace. It's comforting, right? It's comforting for Granny Blake to know that this isn't all there is, right? They're like, this was not it. That she was just a pawn in the game of God and Satan, and that was it. It's an honorable thing that Spawn does. It's an incredible thing that Spawn does. And so following this, the power of divine Spawn really comes into fruition yet again when he shows up to this location where all these forces of hell are fighting and basically says, this is my world, you have no place here. If your loyalty is to Satan, then go back to hell. And almost like somebody who can warp reality on a planetary and even a cosmic scale, the ground literally opens and all these forces are banished back to hell. All these hellspawn are banished back there, right? It's not a wish that like the mother of creation granted. Spawn did that himself. Spawn said, all of you go back to hell, and then sent them there, right? And that's where they are now, right? I mean, with that being said, like the forces of Satan are basically gone now, right? Like they're totally obliterated. From there, you end up picking up with Satan himself, and Satan begins to kind of ask the question, like, where are all my hellspawn? Like something's missing here. Where are all my hellspawn at? And that's when one of his demons approaches approaches him and says, well, like Spawn basically, like some hell spawn out there with wings sent them all back to hell. I saw it with my own eyes. Satan gets pissed, right? Rips this guy's eyes out. And then from there, you end up jumping to God. And basically, like Spawn shows up on the doorstep of God. And, you know, when he says, where is Zara? Spawn says, she's right here. I've got her head. Get out of here, right? Like, leave this world. This world belongs to me now, right? Like, leave all of this. And so initially, God and Satan, you know, kind of team up for a second and then go directly after Spawn. And when that happens, Spawn unleashes the full totality of his power. And probably one of the most insane displays of the Spawn comic that I've ever seen. Spawn unleashes the full totality of his powers and says, let this all be done. And using his abilities, cleanses the entirety of the earth. He literally wipes everything out. It's nuts. It says, like, when he looked about him and saw what he had done, Spawn wept. For all the world was desolation and mankind was no more. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. In the next video, we will pick up with the ending. We will pick up with Spawn versus God and Satan. And I will catch you all later. Peace. I want to say thank you to all of the new patrons who have joined patreon.com/comicsexplained. I want to give a shout out to Henry, Young Typhon, Elias G, David JS, Jacob H, Ben, John H, Jason C, Austin S, Austin H, James O, Chris T, Matt N, Jeff R, Joey M, Stephen Z, Sloth Like Lou, David C, John H, Lean and Mean. That guy asks questions all the time. Adam K, Genosis 916. I want to say thank you to all of you all. This list is growing all the time. Thank you for joining the Patreon.